Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today. Our topic today is Mining Your Business for Lost Profits. Our presenter today is Randy McLean, President and Founder of Waypoint Analytics. Over to you, Randy.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you all for attending this morning. I'm pretty excited. We have a new topic today, and what we're going to look at in this session across the next 30 minutes is the profit opportunity that exists in every business and every wholesale distribution business. And let me start at the top with a factoid, and that is every business in the wholesale distribution space is at best getting about 20 to 25% of the profits it actually makes on its profitable business to the bottom line. Let me repeat that. We have never encountered a company in our travels throughout the industry that is getting any more than 1/4 to 1/5 of their actual profits they generate to the bottom line. Now, why is that? The answer is that we don't have good systems or tools for us to be able to see where we're making and losing money. Now, that may seem like a little bit of a surprise to you, but frankly, the automated systems that have been built over the last few decades have had some central purposes, and none of them have been profitability. They are designed to make sure that we can track our inventory, to make sure that we can track our receivables, and to make sure that we have good enough financial statements to be able to keep the banks and the IRS happy. And they're very, very good at doing those things, and they have a lot of bells and whistles that have been added on. But none of them actually track profitability on any kind of a granular basis. And because of that, companies look at a bottom line, and they do, some number of tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, and they wind up with hopefully some kind of a positive bottom line, and they say, hey, that's great, I'm doing as well as the other guys do, because they're all in the same environment. What's happened recently is that computer technology has caught up with this need, and we have the ability finally to track the profitability of each thing that we do, every single invoice line, in systems like Waypoint. In fact, that's the whole reason for Waypoint's existence, is to be an add-on system that gives companies additional insights to where they're making and losing money. Now, the reason that this is so valuable and has had such a high success rate is that companies, when they get the insights into where they're making and losing money, they can very quickly fine-tune their practices to meet what somebody had termed the big, hairy, audacious goal of not losing money on anything they do. And companies that do that can double, triple, quadruple their bottom line in very short order. So let me give you some examples of what I mean by all this, or show you some proof of this. This is Acme Distributing, and this is a sample data set that we borrowed some years ago with permission from an actual company. And these numbers are real numbers, not numbers that we have just to illustrate a point. Now, we've sanitized the data to change the names of the people and the companies and the products and so on and so forth to be something other than what they were, so that we can keep our promises of confidentiality and we can meet the terms that we negotiated the use of this information from. But within this data pool, we can see a very good example of what I'm talking about. And what I'm going to look at is a peak internal profit report for the fiscal year of 2010. So in this business, what we've done is we've started with a blank chart, or the system started with a blank chart, and it's because the Waypoint system calculates an actual P&L on every single invoice line. We can look at an invoice line and we can say we know what the revenue is, we know what the cost of goods was, so we can tell what the gross profit is, and then we know how much selling expense there was, if any, how much order entry expense there was, if any. It might have been an EDI order, in which case it has a different cost structure than if we have customer service people entering the order into terminals. And so it can track that and may or may not have the cost on the order based on that. It can tell what was paid to the sales rep that generated this, if it was a commissionable sale. So it may not carry commission in a particular line. It can tell whether it was a warehouse shipment or if it was a direct ship or cross dock, in which case the cost structures could be different, and there might not be any warehouse cost, and it knows that on the particular sale, and all the way down to G&A. So we know how much profit was made or how much loss was taken on the particular line of the particular invoice that we're looking at. When we do that, then on this chart, what we've taken is the very most profitable invoice line that the company had all year, and we put it on the chart here. And then we stack the additional profit we made on the second most profitable, third, fourth, fifth, tracking all the way up here. And this whale curve, as they call it, shows what actually happened in the business. In about the first 25%, or roughly 25 to 30% of all the invoice lines the company made, they had almost $2.2 million in sold, delivered, collected bottom line profits. All the operational expenses are in, all the commissions are in. Everything is included up until this point. But then they had some lines where they just broke even, and then they started having lines that lost increasing amounts of money, where they had sold something and they had generated maybe $40 in gross profit, but then it cost them more than $40 to service that line, to basically process and handle the product or the service and get it into the customer's hands. And so in the end, the company had about a $375,000 bottom line. And this is sort of historical for the company, $375 on $20 million of business and so on and so forth. It was sort of what they were doing around that era, and that looked pretty normal to them. They had no concept that they had more than 5 times that amount of profit going through the business. And so being able to see this in the first place is the first key, is just knowing that it's there. So I'll just tell you this. If you look at the best bottom line that you've ever had in the history of your company, the actual profits you had flowing through the business was 4 to 5 times that amount. And that money can be had without going out and slashing overhead, although everybody pretty much did that in the last few years with the recession and the economy the way it's been. And that certainly helps generate the profits. But really what's happening is we do business with it in a dysfunctional way on certain products with certain customers, certain vendor lines, and they basically drain our profits away and we don't have any visibility into them. So this is the real reflection of what's going on in this business. So I'd like to take a look at why we are that way, and take a look at our customer ranking, and I'm going to go and look at a customer accumulated profit report. And this is where Waypoint puts together a complete ranking of all the customers and shows how much money we made or lost on them. And we have the what I call the high points of the P&L. And if you think about the P&L, it's, it measures the things that come in that are good for the company, like revenue and gross profit and bottom line profit. And it also shows where there's takeaways from that, where we have the cost of goods for the product that we had to purchase, and we had all of our expenses, and so on and so forth. And when I look at the numbers that basically I want to drive upward on the P&L, it boils down to these 4 columns. There's the revenue, the gross profit, a new term NBC, or net before commission, and then a net profit. Now, what the NBC is, and this is a vital statistic, this is a metric every company should have. You should have at least one version of your P&L that shows NBC. And what this really is we structure the P&L in such a way. Let me show you a quick P&L here so you can see what I'm talking about. We structure the P&L. We have it's pretty much standard except for one item. We leave the sales compensation to the very end. So we have revenue, cost of goods, giving us gross profit and gross margin. We have all of our operating expenses, excluding what we pay the customer-facing sales reps, not the support people, not the management, just the people that are actually doing the real selling that we typically would pay commissions on, or we may pay salaries depending on what our culture is. But we leave that off the equation. And so we have gross profit, then we have our operating expenses, we deduct one from the other, and we have NBC. This is essentially how much money we've made after we've procured the product and paid for it, and after we paid for all of our operations to get the product into the customer's hands. And one way of looking at this is the amount of money that the rep and the company team up to generate, and then we split with the rep. So we pay the sales rep out of this fund. And so the NBC number is absolutely critical because it is very problematic to do any kind of a profitability analysis when sales pay is part of it, because there are too many variables in sales pay. We may have bases, salaries, guarantees, draws, other things like that. We have new people starting new territories, not up to speed yet, and these cause great distortions into profit analytics. So if we leave them out of the equation, we can see what it is to do the regular line of business to get the product in the customer's hands and find out if we're making or losing money. So it is the perfect metric to take everything into account, not only our volume through revenue, our gross margin and generating, how much GP we generate per revenue dollar, but also all of the expenses that are required in order to get the product in the customer's hands to cover all of our operations. And so this is the key metric. So going back to the accumulated profit report, we can see for each customer what our revenue, gross profit, NVC, and net profit have been. And I want to start at the top. Our most profitable customer here is about $809,000 in revenue, generates $276,000 in gross profit, and makes us $146,000 of bottom line profit. And that is our best customer in the entire company. And yet, even within that company, when we go and look at the invoice history, where we see the profitability of every single invoice, when we scroll down to the bottom, we can see invoices that we've lost money on. Now, some of these are credits or small orders, which we can see. But if I scroll up here, I can see a single invoice here for $685 that we lost $87 on. And so, if I take a look at it, I can pop up the invoice. You can't see it right now. I can see it on my screen. But essentially what's happened is that we have $214 of expenses on an invoice that generated $126 in gross profit. And so it cost us more for this invoice than the invoice generated for us. And ultimately that's what the issue is. Apologize for not showing you that invoice. If I do that, we won't be able to get a proper recording of the session for you to watch later or for others to participate in. So I have to stick with the screen I have right now. So I'm just reading those numbers off to you. So at any rate, the main point of it is that even within our profitable accounts, we have unprofitable business. And one of the keys is when we start looking at business that we do that's unprofitable, even with our best accounts, this is some of the low-hanging fruit that's easy for us to go after. So moving along, what I'd like to do is take a look at the SKU popularity report and get a sense of what products we have that we're making and losing money on and why. And one of the critical issues that we may have when we're looking at how we're operating the business is we may not have good price policies. And one of the things that's very important in this decade is strategic pricing, making sure that you're pricing accordingly, according to the cost structure of the business that you're sending out to the customer. And so here I have a number of products. We have the quantity sold, the average selling price, the revenue that was generated by the product, gross profit and gross margin, and the NBC, and the net profit. And this column is tinted green or red to help us quickly see where we're making and losing money. And one of the items I want to look at near the top here is this item here. We sold 143,000 of these large plane, 4.5 large planes, but $250,000 for this product was sold, but we lost about $9,000 selling it. So I'd like to, so we can do a diagnostic here to find out what it is that's causing, this to happen. And so what we have is price levels here. And here's a chart that shows the pricing for each customer, showing their gross profit margin versus their volume, their purchase volume. So along the bottom, as we move to the right, they're buying increasing quantities of these things across the year. We have one customer that buys over 8,000 of these things a year. And then along the left-hand side, we show what the gross margin is. Now, in most but not all wholesale distribution companies, price negotiation is part of the game. It's part of what you do. And frequently this is in the hands of salespeople, but under the guidance of the company. And as you know, sometime back in the dark ages of wholesale distribution, some genius thought this through and said, wow, if we had a customer and they bought a whole bunch of this stuff whatever it is, of this item all at once, then we could bring it in on skids or some large quantity or container or something like that. We could ship it back out to the customer on the same thing. We wouldn't have to break it down and bin it and then pull it back and then pull it and pack it back, give it back to the customer. We could save an enormous amount of money on this because there's a lot of things we wouldn't have to do, and it would be a large sale that had low transaction costs associated with it, and therefore we could afford to have a lower margin or charge a lower price than we normally would on this. But through the vagaries of time, that whole thought process, which made a lot of sense, has devolved into large volume, low price. And nobody gives any consideration to what the dynamics or the transactional costs of this thing can be. And that's what gets us into trouble frequently and gets us to underprice the product, where we have higher operating expenses than we think we do when we're selling a certain volume of product. And so as people negotiate prices, and you have contract pricing, and you have, in some cases, people are setting prices for their best customers and so on and so forth, and in the probably the worst case, you just have some guy or gal that just prices everything at 20%, and that's all they do all day. And you could do just as well by having a robot or a chimpanzee in a company T-shirt do this. So what you really want to do is give some thought to where what your cost structure is that comes along with this. At any rate, this chart shows a product where we really don't have much in the way of pricing discipline. Now, this red line shows essentially the company pricing standard. Now, it may not be set by the company, but it's effectively what the working standard is for the people that are setting the pricing throughout this fiscal year. Each one of these dots represents a customer, and as you can see, there is a bit of a correlation between a lower gross margin and a higher volume. So the line is tilting down to the right the way we would expect it to. But if you look at it, there's lots of people. Here we've got somebody buying 6,000 of these things, buying nearly 7,000 of these things, and they're paying more than people down here buying a few hundred of them. Now, it may be because they're a large client, they buy a lot of other stuff, and that's what it is. But essentially, if we were doing a perfect job of pricing, all of these dots would fall right along this red line. And so we would have a good sense of what basically we wouldn't be underpricing people that are down here below the line. These are people that are not buying the same volume as other people, but are certainly paying a lower price than other people that are buying larger volumes. And that's something that we probably would be concerned about. Now, what we can do is we can take a look at that same customer group through a different lens. And the different lens here is that here we can list each one of those dots. We can see who they are, what their quantity and revenue, and what their actual gross margin is. And then we have a target gross margin. The target gross margin is, if they're above the line, is leave it where it is. If they're below the line, it says bring it up to that red line. So each one of these things that's tinted in pink is a customer that's paying less for these things than other people like them or people buying similar volumes do. So here's David Penske Chevrolet. They're buying 7,500 of these, almost 7,600 a year. They're paying a 24.9 margin, but if they were paying the same as other people do and they've just priced up to that line, they'd be paying 26.4. And this is what it would do to the bottom line of the company. Right now, we're actually making $144 on that $13,000 worth of product that's being sold. If we brought them up to the line, we'd be making $339. So what we would do is we would more than double the profitability in that one item if we brought the margin up by less than 2%. And so as we go through this on this one product for the 1 year, if we only just brought the people below the line up to the line, we put $8,700 on the bottom line, and that's only for one product of the thousands and thousands of products that are being sold by this company. Now, you may not be able to solve the issue here, but what you can do is we can see who's typically selling them. And when I look at this, Thea and James tend to be the reps that have the most customers that are priced below the line. And so I have a sense here that we have certain reps here that are tending to more frequently price customers for particular products below the line. And so we have a little bit of a diagnostic and start to do something about this. And by the way, There are companies out there, we don't do strategic pricing. There's some companies out there like Evergreen that do a superb job of this, and Evergreen, in fact, takes an export of all of the data straight from Waypoint, and it not only does pricing by the, breaking up segments by industry and size and that kind of thing, but they also take into account the cost structure that comes in with each customer. Each customer imposes a particular cost structure. They want their stuff every day, and they want it in small. They're kind of dysfunctional and give you panic orders all the time and that kind of thing. That affects their cost structure, and they take that kind of thing into account. Nobody else does that, and you can see that kind of thing in Waypoint. And the reason they're able to do that is they take all of the profitability information from Waypoint and use it as part of the pricing deal. So at any rate, moving on, we can get the sense that there may be some things we can do with pricing. I also think that there's a great opportunity to do things with certain vendors. So there are two dimensions that are very important on what we do with the vendors. And the reason the vendors are very important is because they're a great team member that you can team up with to help tackle some of these profitability issues. The vendors need the business just as much as we do, and if you don't have sell-through at your end, or if you're doing something that's unsustainable in your business, it's not in their best interest for basically their product lines to be draining your profits. And so they're frequently can be quite responsive, and even some of the largest, gargantuan vendors have a particular dimension to their personalities, and that is that you may just be a fly to the fly speck to them, and you may be very, very small, and they're very, very big. But the thing about large vendors is they tend to be hugely numbers driven, and one of the things that they're always interested in and have a very difficult time getting is information about how their products are doing in the downstream in the channel. So a lot of our clients have had great success by being able to pull reports like this showing the profitability and dynamics of how the product's going out, going back to the vendor, and then teaming up to find new ways of packaging or producing the product, new ways of selling it and getting out into the channel that can alleviate profitability issues, which create a win-win for the vendor and for you. And in some cases, in fact, most cases, create a win-win-win because the customer also gets a win by being more profitable than they do. So on that product line. So when I look down here, I'm going to just pick one of our biggest suppliers here, Trans World Consortium, $2.4 million worth of revenue for us, $581,000 of gross profit in this line. It's frankly the largest supplier for this company, and it's a money loser. And we can get in and find out why that is by getting a sense of, first of all, get a profit breakdown showing, how much we purchase, how much revenue they're responsible for, what our purchases are worth, about $1.8 million. They generated $581,000 in gross profit at a 23.8 margin, which is pretty respectable. But the problem is that we're being eaten alive by the expenses on all of this. And so our cost to serve is about $622,000 on $581,000 of gross profit generation. And frankly, that's the whole story in everything that you do. Under quantum profit management, which is sort of the technique for looking at profitability in this area, the first interesting line for us is gross profit. And essentially the rule of thumb is, and it may seem obvious to everybody, but frankly, it wasn't to me 10 years ago. The gross profit generation is the first line that we're interested in wholesale distribution, and the whole key to the whole business is making sure that our cost to serve is lower than that, so we're making money. In this case, it's not. And so now we can see the cost to serve is about 25.5% of revenue, and it means that we have to be able to get at least that margin on the products from this vendor in aggregate in order to make money on this line, unless we can somehow change the cost dynamics. And we have whole sessions about how to do that, so we can get a sense of where this is. But ultimately, we can also dig more deeply into this and take a look at every SKU from that particular vendor, look at the profitability of it. And we make good money on a lot of the things that we sell from them. But unfortunately, down at the bottom, there are certain products that that are draining our profits away. And getting some insights into which products are doing that can help us with our pricing, with our margins, maybe with our logistics, so that we can make sure that it doesn't cost us as much to sell these particular products. We handle them more efficiently, and that can add profit to the business without going out and having to cut costs. So now I said there was two dimensions to this that were very important, and the first dimension is just getting the ranking and finding out what we're doing now. But the more important one, and the one that the most sophisticated management teams will be using, is profit deltas, the change in profitability. And through a Waypoint, we can do this on the customers, on the reps, and so on and so forth. But here's the underlying principle that's very, very important. Everybody that is working in the business has some key responsibilities. And whether it's written on your job description or not, the top responsibility, the thing that you're really, really responsible for, is making sure that the company's results are better this year than last year, and they're better next year than this year. And the only metric that matters is profitability. So everything that you do, everything that's on your job description, all the meetings that you have, everything that that you have to decide on in the course of the day is supposed to be, or probably is, in service of that goal, making the company better. The big challenge is that most companies don't have any monitoring or reporting on that, and they don't have any way of seeing how things are changing for the better and for the worse, so you can focus on the things that are generating the most forward progress, and you can also get to work on the things that are holding you back from having that progress. And Delta reports are absolutely crucial for this. So here we have every single vendor, revenue, gross profit, gross margin, and NBC for last year and this year. And we have the delta, how much the NBC has changed. Remember, NBC is the critical metric. And so at the very top, Drax Corporation has helped us the most, and frankly, it's helped us the most because we're just not selling them anymore. We used to lose a heck of a lot of money on their stuff. Now we're only losing a little bit on the residual business, and they're gone. We're $65,000 of profitability better off by not having them. And that's one of the things that we see here. Next thing is we picked up Fidelity Republic here, and they've increased the profitability of product lines there. That's the second best thing that happened to us all year. We had a company down here that we lost money that we've lost, and if we go far enough down, we find a new company we're doing business with that we are getting profits on that we never had before. These are all good things. Down at the bottom of the list, we have the opposite occurring. At the very bottom, we have Trans World, and unfortunately, we're increasing our sales and revenues on there. But the good news is that we've got a gain in gross profit, and that's helping reduce the NBC. But what's happened here is the margin has dropped, and because of that, the profit generation has dropped. So we're $77,000 worse off with these guys at the NBC level than we were before. And so the margin erosion in this vendor line right here is being compounded by the increase in revenue. And this is something that I want to focus on right away because it's draining away $75,000 NBC, and a lot more than that after we pay for the sales commissions for the sales of this vendor's products. So down at the bottom here, these are the things that are dragging us in the wrong direction. And so it's very, very important to have these Delta reports so that we can get in and find out where we're making losing money, where the profits are changing, and so that we can attack these things. The companies that do this have doubled and tripled their bottom line without having to go out and gain any new sales. And it's been very hard to gain new sales in a flat economy, and yet there's companies that have doubled and tripled their profits across the course of the last year or two. And every company can do this, and you can too. So at any rate, I wanted to thank you very much for coming in to see us. I'd be delighted to spend more time with your teams showing you what Waypoint does. Of course, it's my job to help companies get Waypoint, get those profitability, and that's how I earn my living. So I'd be delighted to be able to speak with you further on these topics and others, and show you and your team how an inexpensive tool like Waypoint can give you new insights and new paths to profitability and help you mine those lost profits that are flowing through your business every day.
All right, Randy, thank you very much.